Why are you doing it? Are you doing it in order to get appreciation? If you're doing it in order to get appreciation, you may get some appreciation, you may not get some appreciation. I mean, I've thought about all the sermons I've preached in my 30-plus years now of doing this, and I don't want any, I'm not begging for anything. But I am used to not getting any response. So do I stop? Do you stop? If you don't get any response, do you stop? Or do you do it because you love the people for whom you're doing it? That's the real question. And it's tough for all of us, believe me. I have my moments, you have yours. But that's the question. Why are you doing it? And she's angry. He was right about that. Let me read you the other one. Over the summer, I reached out to an ex of mine whom I'd never really gotten over. His response was not favorable. I've come to terms with the fact that there's no chance of a romantic reconciliation between us, but over the past decade, I've remained in contact with his family, especially his mother and his sister, who are lovely people. We email a few times a year and send Christmas and sometimes birthday cards. After this summer's exchange, I unfriended my ex's mother and sister from Facebook. At the time, it was too painful for me to see photos of him and hear updates about him. Now, 6 months have passed, and I received both a birthday greeting and a Christmas card from his sister. I feel bad for cutting off contact with no explanation. What should I do, Amy? Should I explain to them what happened? Refriend them without explanation? Remain silent on Facebook, but continue sending birthday and holiday greetings? Reconsidering. And Amy says, you don't have to talk about your feelings about your ex. That's private business, and you can probably assume that the family members know something about it anyway. And you know, you got friends with these friends, and you should just transcend the awkwardness, and that's the kind of stuff she says. What did the McDonald's commentator have to say? Tar and feather yourself. Again, I think he nailed it. Because I have a question. I don't know if she's an ex-husband or not. Doesn't say, right? Just an ex. I think ex-husband would have been said had it been one. So I think it's ex-boyfriend. I bet it's an ex-high school boyfriend. Because I have met plenty of women, unfortunately, who fantasize about the ex-high school boyfriend. They should go to reunions and see him as he is today. But they still picture him as the young hunk he once was. And they dream that he has always carried the candle for them. And then they long to get together. They don't even care that he might be married. Perhaps he's unhappy. You say it's the kind of thing that isn't said here. I think she may have been horribly out of line, which is why she was rebuffed. And this is a bunch of somewhat infantile nonsense. And so, if so, then tar and feather yourself applies. Anyway, all that was an aside, and I don't even know what's in here, except that I thought it was funny. And I think it does apply. You'll see why in a minute. The interesting thing about both of those is my answer to each would be, this is not about you. There is your problem. You think it's about you. It's nothing to do with you. Joseph is telling his people something very interesting, going along with the theme of the other thing, which is don't spend everything you have. Besides, money is not as important as we think. These people were out of money, but that didn't matter. All they cared about was food. And the lack of money is hardly even mentioned, except to say we don't have any. Ellen Langer has done some groundbreaking research into human behavior, and she tells a story where she went to purchase something at a store, and she offered her brand new credit card to the clerk, and the clerk noticed that the card was not signed. So she handed it back to the psychologist, who signed the card right in front of the clerk, which is fine. And then the card was processed and the receipt was generated, and Langer signed the receipt. And then she noted that the clerk compared the signature on the receipt with the signature on the card. You got that yet? Okay. She said, obviously, she was so used to comparing the card and the receipt that it never occurred to her that she had seen both of them signed in her presence seconds before. Because that's somewhat how human behavior is. We have senseless habits. And think about your attitudes towards money. We have the idea, do we not, that we cannot survive unless we have some. True? Don't we all kind of feel that way? Isn't that the way the system is designed to make us think? The people of Egypt found out this wasn't true. I mean, money's nice to have, let me tell you. And all of us wouldn't mind trying out a little more, just to see if we could handle it. But if a crisis comes, will not God care for you? Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things, for your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. The story in Genesis illustrates all of this. The people of Egypt came to Joseph saying, what will we eat? And God had already provided for them in the first place by sending them Joseph and sending a dream to the king. Verse 18 of Genesis 47, when that year was ended, they came to him the next year, and they said to him, we will not hide from my Lord that our money is all spent, the cattle are all my Lord's. There's nothing left for my Lord except our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh. So give us seed. Now that's interesting. Why do they want seed? We'll talk about that in a second. That we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. This is probably the 7th year, and they knew the prophecy. So they were preparing themselves for land that would finally have water and would grow food, and that's why they wanted seed. But they had nothing left with which to bargain. The cash was gone, their animals were gone, so they said, what if we sell our labor and our lands to you? Not to Joseph, but to the king. And some people say that Joseph is enslaving them all. He manipulated the whole thing. Remember that whole idea. But all of his wise preparations came in handy right here. The survival instinct is a strong one. It's more powerful than land that would not grow anything and labor that would work for no effect. What was their land and labor worth at this point? But if they had seed and the famine actually does end, then they have reason to work again, and they're trusting in that, and they're hoping that that will be the case. And so they're giving up that which they were losing anyway to gain something that they hoped they would gain from God. Okay? So that was a piece of advice, and that leads us to another piece of advice. Don't save that which is not worth saving. Jesus made this point when he discussed the rich man in Luke chapter 12. And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease. Eat, drink, and be merry. And God said to him, you fool. This very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. There's no preparation that matters more in this life than our relationship with the living God. Nothing else is more valuable. And if you die with millions in the bank, you have saved that which is not worth saving and possibly lost that which you should have taken. Destroyed your chance at gaining that which is truly worth having, which is an eternal relationship with God. And eternal friendships with the people who also have an eternal relationship with God. The only thing that's eternal in this world is you and I. The world itself is going to disappear and all that goes with it and be replaced with something better. But we last. I found there's nothing more valuable than good friendships. And I found a picture on that font of knowledge known as Facebook. Bunch of little dogs, aren't they cute? When you're up in life, your friends get to know who you are. But when you're down in life, you get to know who your friends are. And that is so true. Don't forget it. People who have power and status and money and fame will find others drawn to them who want a piece of what they have. But if they lose any of that, if they lose that which drew those people, they discover quickly that those good friends aren't good friends at all. We need friends that we can count on and people that really have been there for us, and those are the friends we should cultivate. Verse 20. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every Egypt sold his field because the famine was severe upon him. And thus the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he removed them to the cities from one end of Egypt's border to the other. How am I doing? Okay. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off that allotment which Pharaoh gave them. And that's just telling you the economic and social structure of the country after this. Therefore, they did not sell their land. And then Joseph said to the people, "Behold, I have today bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here's seed for you, and you may sow the land. And at the harvest, you will give a fifth to Pharaoh." Notice they're expecting one, so was Joseph. "And 4 fish shall be for your own, for seed of the field, for your food, and for those your households, and as food for your little ones." And so they said, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's slaves." Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, valid to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. Only the land of the priests did not become Pharaoh's. Now this is kind of a feudalistic society, and we'll see that again in the medieval era. And it is a forerunner to the idea that government owns everything. Communism, by the way, is where the government owns the land and the factory. They own the land and the means of production. They own everything. That's what communism is. Socialism is where people own the land and the government owns the means of production. And capitalism is where people own everything, theoretically. And each system has its own flaws, but I've just given you a rough overview of all that. And here you've got the government owns the land, and the people got to keep what they grew, except for 1 or 20% of it. And Jewish thinkers believe that this experience in Egypt gave the nation of Israel a love for freedom. They loved the freedom that they eventually gave themselves to own the land and the means of production. And from that biblical base came the same love of freedom that we have in this country, and explains where capitalism came from in this country, particularly why we celebrate it. But not to say that capitalism is the perfect answer to everything. It is not, nor is any human government. I'm waiting for only one government, and the government that I know will work. Jesus. I'm a theocratic guy. As long as God is ruling, I'm happy. The tax rate was 20% for Egypt. That was pretty reasonable, frankly. The tax rate today in America, roughly, on average, for everybody, is about 50%. You say, well, I don't pay that much. Yeah, you do. You just don't know it. Most of it's hidden. The excise taxes and the taxes on business and the rest of the stuff that are passed along to us in the form of higher prices. The gasoline tax, the phone tax, and all the other taxes. There are lots and lots of taxes. Our tax rate's about 50%, and it's well known that we have the highest tax rate of any industrialized nation on business in the world. So you decide for yourself how you feel about that. I'm not making a political point. That was merely a political moment. My point here is that the people of Egypt were grateful to Joseph. He saved their lives. He gave them the means to support themselves. And from this came the result that the aristocracy of Egypt lost power. Power became centralized in Pharaoh. And what happened is that only Pharaoh was any danger to the nation of Israel from that point forward, which worked great for hundreds of years. It didn't work so good in the last 100 or so years. But prior to that, Israel was safe. It was a long time before Pharaoh turned on him, which now leads to the final piece of advice, which is trust God. He has a plan. He was in charge of all of this, and he's in charge of your life. He can handle you if he can handle Egypt. And really, it's not about you. It's only about you when it's not about you.